In a world that feels like it's constantly fracturing, and I'm sure we can all see that in our own nation, how do we, as Christian leaders, actually build bridges? Well, today we're going to dive into a really powerful answer from Miroslav Volf's book, Exclusion and Embrace. And listen, this isn't just some abstract theory. For all of you who are getting ready for ministry in a place as wonderfully complex and diverse as Nigeria, this stuff is essential. It's practical, on-the-ground theology. So Volf doesn't start off in some quiet academic library. No, he starts on the streets. He starts with these raw, painful images of conflict that were all over the news in his day. Shells falling in Sarajevo, riots burning in Los Angeles, neo-Nazis marching in Berlin. To him, these were like flares going up, signaling this huge global crisis of identity, a world literally tearing itself apart. And let's be real for a second, those flares are still burning brightly today, aren't they? Maybe even in our own backyards. Okay, so how do we get from a world of exclusion to a ministry of embrace? That's our journey for today. We're going to start by really diagnosing the deep problem of exclusion. Then we'll take a hard look at the world's failed attempts to fix it. After that, we'll make a big turn to the radical, cross-shaped solution that only Christianity can offer. And finally, we'll land on what this powerful idea of embrace actually looks like for us as leaders on the ground. Right. First things first, we have to name the wound. What exactly is this problem of exclusion? Wolf was writing this decades ago, but wow, what he diagnosed back then has become a full-blown pandemic of the soul in our time. Just look at this contrast on the screen for a minute. It's pretty jarring. After the Cold War ended, it felt like the whole world just took a deep breath. There was all this incredible hope for a new era of democracy, of unity, but that dream, it soured really, really fast. The reality that came crashing in was the complete opposite, a revival of ancient hatreds, a fierce nationalism, and just brutal, ugly conflict. And the tragic part, as Wolf points out, is that Christians were often right there in the thick of it, fighting against other Christians or their neighbors. And this wasn't just a problem in Europe, it was like a global contagion. At the time, there were more than 50 hotspots of identity-based conflict raging around the world. I mean, just let that number sink in. From the Balkans to Kashmir to Rwanda, people were fracturing along the lines of tribe, of faith, of ethnicity. Does any of this sound familiar? And this is where we get to the heart of the diagnosis. Wolf's huge insight is this: the violence, all the wars and the riots, they're just the symptoms. The disease underneath it all is a crisis of identity and otherness. The questions that are really fueling all this fire are primal ones. Who are we and who are they? And is it even possible for us to live together when our very sense of who we are feels like it's under attack? So, if that's the problem, what's the world's solution? Well, a lot of the time, it's to just double down on identity, right? To build our walls even higher. But Wolfschek warns us that this path, which he calls identitarianism, it's not a solution at all. It's a trap. And one of the most sneaky, dangerous forms of this trap is something Wolf calls political religion. This is what happens when we take the huge, boundless God of the universe and shrink him down into a little tribal deity. Christianity stops being this universal message of salvation for everyone and just becomes another cultural ID card, a weapon we use to get our group's political agenda done. God becomes not the Lord of all, but just a mascot for us. So this toxic way of thinking is basically built on two main pillars. The first one says your tribe, your ethnic group comes first, before your neighbor, before our shared humanity, even before God. And the second one, it says that using violence is okay, not just to defend your life, but to defend a culture or an identity. The sword basically becomes a sacrament. And hey, don't just take Wolf's word for it. Look at what the people who promote this ideology say about it themselves. This guy, Alan de Benoist, a leading identitarian thinker, is surprisingly honest. He says his worldview is fundamentally pagan because it has to reject the universalism that's at the very heart of our Judeo-Christian faith. He gets it. He knows that a God who is for all people is the enemy of a politics that is only for one people. Okay, so if identitarianism is the world's dead-end street, where in the world do we find the Christian alternative? Well, Wolf tells us to look away from the halls of power, away from political strategies, and to fix our eyes on a barren hill outside Jerusalem. We have to look to the cross. Now, this is a really critical shift in how we think. The world usually asks, okay, what's the best system we can build to manage all this conflict? But Wolf says the Christian question has to come first. And it's a different question. It's, what kind of people do we need to become to live in peace? You see the shift? The focus moves from engineering society to forming souls. And at the absolute center of this soul formation is the cross. Here, building on the work of the theologian Jürgen Moltmann, Wolff shows us its profound two-sided reality. On one hand, yes, God on the cross stands in complete solidarity with the victim, with the oppressed, with the abandoned. But, and you have to get this is the radical part. At the exact same time, the cross is God's loving act of atonement for the perpetrator. It is God giving himself up for his enemies. The cross is for the victim and for the victimizer, both. So this reveals the core logic of the entire gospel, what Wolff calls divine self-donation. God's way is not to crush his enemies, but to give himself for them in love so that he can welcome them into relationship with him. And this isn't just some beautiful, abstract theological idea. No, this is the blueprint. It is the pattern for our own lives and our own ministries. All right, so if self-giving love is God's blueprint, how do we actually build with it? How does this massive theology become a concrete, real-life practice in a world that is so determined to exclude? This is the question, isn't it? This is where our theology has to meet our ethics, where what we believe has to change how we behave. If the world's logic is exclusion, what's the logic of the cross? Wolff gives us the answer in one single powerful metaphor: embrace. Now, this quote right here is the heart of the entire book. Just notice the words he uses. Embrace isn't a feeling, it's a will. It's a choice we make. It's not about demanding that the other person changes first. It's about readjusting our own identity to make space for them. And here's the most radical challenge of all. This has to happen before we pass judgment. Before we decide if they are friend or foe, worthy or unworthy, we are called to open our arms. And this isn't just some vague sentimental wish. Wolff actually lays it out as a spiritual discipline with clear steps. It all starts with the will, that conscious decision to open our arms. Then comes the hard internal work of making space, of rearranging our own hearts and minds to accommodate them. And it all leads to the physical act of welcoming, of actually receiving them into that new space we've created, just as Christ has received every one of us. Okay, let's bring this right home. Let's bring it right into this room, into our context. What does this deep, profound theology of embrace actually mean for a pastor, for a church planner, for a Christian leader getting ready for ministry right here in Nigeria? A nation of incredible diversity, but also, let's be honest, deep divisions. Well, this theology gives us a real, practical ministry toolkit. It means we have to be the first ones to resist wrapping our ethnic or national flag around the cross of Jesus. It calls us to build churches that don't just talk about being multicultural, but are actively, intentionally making space for the other. It gives us the courage to preach a gospel of radical, costly forgiveness, precisely because our God is a God who died for his enemies. And it completely reframes our pursuit of justice, not as a weapon we can use against our opponents, but as a core part of the embrace itself. And so in the end, Wolff's theology doesn't just stay as a good idea in a book. It lands as a question for our lives. The challenge is now in our hands, in our churches, and in our hearts. In your community, in your specific context, who is the other? Who is the enemy? And how is the cross of Jesus Christ compelling you not to build another wall, but to open your arms in embrace?